Right now above your head, more than 27,000 objects are flying around the Earth. Dead satellites, broken rockets, bits of metal from crashes nobody remembers. We track every one, we give each one a number, we know where they are. At least, that's what we're told. Tonight I'm going to ask you one simple question. It sounds harmless. It isn't. If something was up there that didn't belong, something that never blinked, never moved on its own, never made a sound, would we ever know? And what I found in this investigation shocked me. I'll let you know later on in this episode what that was, so stick around, because long before we put anything into space, before Sputnik, before NASA, radar screens showed objects that shouldn't exist. Newspapers printed stories about them, and the strangest story of all got a name: the Black Knight. NASA says it was junk. Skeptics say it was a mistake. Believers say it is still up there, watching and waiting. Tonight's episode is about something sneakier. Tonight we're not asking if the Black Knight is real. We're following the paper trail. And the paper trail starts with the radar that saw something impossible. Before we move forward, the objective is simple. Thinkavarium breaks apart the government's sleight of hand and cuts through the engineered noise. We give you the raw intelligence to see the chessboard as it actually lies. And now that I've come in from the cold, I no longer have a state-sponsored slush fund. This operation is entirely independent and viewer-supported, which means we answer to you. If you want to help keep the signal alive and the research uncompromised, check the support link in the briefing below. May 1954, 3 years before any nation had put anything into space, a San Francisco newspaper prints a claim from a US Air Force source. Radar had detected 2 satellites in Earth. 2. When the correct number was actually 0. The story came through Donald Kehoe, a former Marine, loud UFO believer, not a neutral witness. And 1950s radar was brand new. It glitched. Weather fooled it. The operators were learning on the job, so mistake? Well, maybe. Probably even. Except it happened again, and this time the machine was better. February 1960, the US Navy has a new radar wall called Dark Fence, purpose-built to catch anything crossing over America, and it catches something scary. An object flying in a highly eccentric polar low Earth orbit. In English, it's flying pole to pole, in an orbit no human technology could achieve. The Pentagon panicked. In 1960, nobody had a rocket strong enough to put a satellite into that path. Not America, not the Soviets. It was impossible. For 3 weeks, the White House quietly sweated. Was it a secret Soviet weapon? Or, as some whispered, had it been there all along? Then the Air Force found its answer. It was a 4-meter metal casing from one of America's own secret launchers, tumbling in a path that nobody expected. Case closed. Our own junk fooled us. But hang on, sit with that answer for a second, because it's actually worse than the mystery. The most powerful military on Earth stared at an object above its own head for 3 weeks and couldn't name it. If our own rocket casing could do that in 1960, then what exactly did NASA photograph in 1998? December 1998, Space Shuttle Endeavour. The astronauts are bolting the first pieces of the International Space Station together, and in a series of NASA photos, something appears. A dark object, sharp edges, strange angles. It doesn't look like traditional NASA junk. It looks engineered. The internet found these photos and it lost its mind. Finally, proof, the Black Knight, caught on camera by NASA itself. NASA's answer is almost funny. They said it's a blanket, lost during a spacewalk, a piece of thermal insulation used to keep the equipment warm. Apparently it slipped loose and floated away. The astronauts photographed it as it drifted off. A few days later, gravity pulled it back down and burnt it up. Now, the mission records backed this claim up. The paperwork is solid. Space does play tricks with you too. With no air, nothing flutters. A soft blanket holds its twisted shape like it's frozen. And sunlight in space has no softness, so shadows come out black and sharp as knives. So the photo has an official answer, a boring one. But here's the thing the official answer never touches. Forget what NASA says it is for a moment, and look at the shape of it itself. The flat panels, the hard angles, because there's a reason that shape makes your brain scream machine. We build machines shaped exactly like that, on purpose. In the 1980s, America unveiled the strangest aircraft ever built. The F-117 Nighthawk, the first stealth fighter, and it looked wrong. No smooth curves, no sleek lines, just flat panels and hard angles, like a plane that had been folded out of black origami. There was a reason. Radar works like shouting at a wall and listening for an echo. A curved surface bounces some echo back, no matter where you stand. But a flat-angled panel, it throws the echo away, off in another direction. Think of it like throwing a ping-pong ball at an F-117. The ball is guaranteed never to bounce back to you. The plane is right there, but the radar hears nothing. And here's the part that matters. That trick costs no power. It's not a gadget you switch on. It is just pure geometry. The shape is stealth. Now go back to that 1998 photo. Flat facets, sharp angles, and like the F-117, it's black. If you were designing a probe to sit above a planet for thousands of years, power would be everything. Every drop of energy would be precious. You couldn't waste it on hiding, so you wouldn't hide with power at all. You'd hide with shape. You would facet the fuselage like an F-117, and radar sweeps pass over you and hear almost nothing. It's all free, forever, and every watt you saved could go where it actually matters. The mind of the machine, the computing, the watching, the transmitting, back home. In other words, if the Black Knight was real, it wouldn't look like a flying saucer. It would look like a chunk of angular, black junk. And this is exactly what the photos show. Now I can hear the skeptics, and they might be right to push back. Fair. But it opens up the real question, the biggest one in this whole story. Because if something like that were up there, engineered, powered, patient, how long has it been waiting? Here's the claim that made the Black Knight famous, that it's been up there for 13,000 years. Now where does a number like that come from? It all starts in 1928. A Norwegian engineer named Jørgen Haas was experimenting with the radio. He sends a signal, and seconds later, it comes back. An echo. He sits down and does the math. And the answer is quite unsettling. Impossible even. He calculates that for an echo to take that long, the signal would have had to travel millions of miles, bounce off of something. But bounce off what though? Some scientists blame clouds of charged gas in space. Others had a spookier idea. What if something out there was catching our signals and throwing them back on purpose? Think about it. You use humanity's own voice to say, I hear you. I'm here. In the 1970s, a Scottish writer named Duncan Lunan went back to those echoes. He had a wild theory. What if it was a map? Lunan got to work, plotting the sequence of echoes against the delay of each echo itself, and a picture formed. To his surprise, it was a near-perfect map of the constellation Bootes, and the map seemed to point to one star in particular, a double star called Epsilon Bootis, as if the message was saying, "That's home. That's where we come from." Arcturus, the brightest star in the whole constellation, but it wasn't where it should be according to the star maps he was working from. But what if the sky had changed? Stars drift slowly over thousands of years. They move. So Lunan calculated the drift backwards, winding the sky in reverse until Arcturus slid back into position. The date he landed on was around 11,000 BC, roughly 13,000 years ago. The map told him where it was from, and the misplaced star told him when it arrived. Now transparency, because that's the whole brand here. Lunan himself said that this map was an experiment, a guess, not a true discovery. And the famous witnesses all fall apart too. In 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper supposedly saw a glowing green object over Australia. Cooper believed in UFOs, and he even spoke to the United Nations about them. But he denied that sighting for the rest of his life, explaining that writers had put those words in his mouth. So the number is shaky, the witnesses are shaky, and yet the design keeps holding everything together. A machine that hides with geometry, processes, delays, and returns echoes. That's not fantasy. That's exactly how a serious engineer would build a watcher, meant to last tens of thousands of years. Now this raises a very practical question. If something like that was parked above Earth before we could even write, where would it park? And could it still be blending in, right now, in a sky that we supposedly track completely? The short answer is yes, and it wouldn't even be that hard. There's a path called polar orbit, pole to pole, over the top of the world and the bottom while the Earth turns underneath you. Do that long enough and you sweep the entire planet. It's why spy satellites use it today. In the 1950s, we couldn't reach that orbit. We didn't have the power. Remember the dark fence panic? But for a watcher, it's the perfect seat in the house. Second, hiding in orbit isn't science fiction. We've done it. In the 1980s, America launched a $1 billion spy satellite codenamed Misty. Each one carried an inflatable shield shaped to bounce sunlight and radar away from anybody who was watching from below. Hobby satellite trackers would follow a launch, and then watch the thing simply vanish into the sky. We hid a school bus in orbit for 40 years, with a balloon and a little geometry. But third, and this is my favourite, because it's boring in the best way, you might not need any of that. It's 1965, radar picks up a strange object. It tumbles, it doesn't transmit, it doesn't move on its own, so it gets logged as debris. It gets a number, and from that day on, it is debris, officially, forever. Our tracking systems were built to stop crashes, not to investigate mysteries. They watch speed and direction. They don't ask, is that weird? Nobody holds a weekly meeting called Recheck the Strange Stuff from 1965. As long as the object behaves like junk, travelling in the same path, the same speed, no human ever looks at it again. In a sky full of junk, the best disguise isn't invisibility, it's blending in, normal behaviour. Because now the camouflage isn't stealth technology, it's paperwork. So something could be up there right now, filed under a number and completely unexamined. But that leads to the question that frustrates everyone. The one that's kept this legend alive for 70 years. If any of this is half true, why has no official ever said a single word? No press conference ever revisited 1954, no inquiry into ancient probes, no dramatic denial beyond it was just a blanket. There was just quiet, and people find that suspicious, so let's test it. If the Black Knight was indeed alien, then governments would stay quiet to avoid panic. If it were secret Cold War hardware, they'd stay quiet to protect it. Spy satellites stay classified for decades. That's routine. And if it were nothing at all, glitches and blankets and stories all stitched together, they'd stay quiet because, hey, there's nothing to say. All three stories predict the same silence, which means the silence on its own proves nothing. But silence is a mirror. If you believe something's up there, silence looks like a cover-up. If you don't, silence looks like common sense. Same quiet, but two stories. Before we let that sit, there's one more idea that we haven't touched on, and it's the one that changes how you look at everything else in this episode. What if the silence was never the point? Because hiding was never meant to be permanent. Stay with me, because this is the idea I can't shake. Everything we've covered tonight, the faceted shape, the echoes, the passive drift, the debris disguise, hides something from one kind of observer only. A primitive one. Radar sweeps miss the angles, ears miss the silence, databases file it as junk. But every one of those disguises has an expiry date. Build better telescopes and one day you'll image the object instead of just tracking it. Build better computers and one day software flags the piece of debris whose shape doesn't match anything on the record. Build a real space industry and one day you'll fly close enough to look. In other words, a probe like this doesn't hide from civilization. It hides from a civilization's childhood. Think about what that would mean. You wouldn't need a signal that says, "Come find me." The test is built into the disguise itself. The day we can find it is the day we're ready to go. Not a message waiting to be received, but an exam waiting to be sat. No appointment, no countdown. Just a bar set thousands of years ago. A bar set by engineers of a mature spacefaring species. And here's the shiver. Right now, this decade, we're building exactly those tools. Software that scans the whole catalogue for objects that don't match any launch. Telescopes that can image small debris. Commercial craft that will inspect dead satellites up close. If there were ever a moment a patient watcher would expect to be noticed, it's about now. Or the alternative. There is no Black Knight up there at all, and we may be about to prove that instead. Either way, for the first time in this whole 70-year story, an answer is actually coming. Which brings us to the question I always get asked. What do I think? Here it is. And here is what shocked me. I've kept my cards close all episode. That was deliberate. But you've stayed with me this far, so here it is. As a former intel guy, I know what a cover-up looks like from the inside. And here's the thing that most people get wrong. Cover-ups are clumsy, loud. They have fingerprints, aggressive debunking, ridicule campaigns aimed at witnesses, planted stories, documents that vanish, careers that quietly end. When a government is protecting something, it doesn't ignore the topic. It manages it constantly. And when you're trained in what to look for, you can feel the hand on the wheel. And the more I researched the Black Knight with an open mind, the more one thing bothered me. None of that is here. Nobody's career was ever destroyed over this. No witnesses were ridiculed into silence. Gordon Creeper spent decades talking openly about UFOs and no one stopped him. No documents conveniently vanished. NASA's blanket explanation wasn't a managed narrative. It was a shrug. The government's posture towards the Black Knight for 70 years hasn't been suppression. It's been indifference. And that told me something. This doesn't match the methods governments use when they're covering something up. And that leaves two doors open, not one. Door one, There's nothing there. The radar glitches, blankets, a brilliant name with no origin, and 70 years of us connecting dots that were never connected. Door 2 is stranger. If something is up there, then governments aren't managing the story because it was never theirs to manage. You can't cover up what you've never found. You can't classify what's filed under a debris number nobody has ever rechecked. The silence wouldn't be a lie, it would be a blind spot, and I can't fully close door 2, because everything a patient watcher would need, the shape that deflects radar for free, the orbit that sees everything, it isn't exotic. We've built every piece of it ourselves. The design works, and we know it works. Humans, we're the proof. So, no, I can't hand you a 13,000-year-old machine tonight. The evidence isn't strong enough. But I can tell you, the silence doesn't smell like a cover-up. It smells like a question nobody in power has ever seriously asked. And now finally, we have the tools to ask it. So the next time you see a steady light crossing the night sky, remember our systems track movement. They calculate paths. They prevent crashes. They do not yet ask origin stories. If the most patient watcher in history is up there, it isn't hiding, it's waiting, filed, numbered, waiting for us to grow up and check our own homework. As always, a huge thank you to those who have pledged via Buy Me a Coffee for keeping the ship afloat. You guys allow me to do this independently, and I appreciate it more than you really know. And to ensure that every notification does indeed reach you, visit our brand new website at Thinkavarium.com and sign up to be notified the moment a new episode goes live. And remember, they rely on you forgetting, on you clicking away. Don't do it. Go deeper down the rabbit hole with this next video. And to make sure the signal can find you again, join the network and click subscribe here. And keep free thinking alive. This is Thinkavarium.